This is Buffalo State Data Talk, the podcast where we introduce you to how data is used and explore careers that involve data. In this episode, Brian Berry will be interviewing Jeff Rathmann, the CEO of Silo City IT, a cybersecurity and pen testing firm located in Buffalo, New York. Jeff will talk about what skills are needed to be successful in the industry, tools to get started, and the future of cybersecurity. Stay tuned to hear more.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
To start us off, could you tell us what cybersecurity is in your own terms?
By definition, is usually how I like to explain it for the most part, but a summarized definition is really the protection of any data stored and transmitted between electronic systems. A lot of people think of it solely as protecting computers and data on computers, and not realizing how much data is out there on sensors and your smart light bulbs and your phones. And so it's really protecting all of those and all of the data that's on those and transmitting between them.
Yeah, there's a lot of data out there, right?
Right.
So, as a cybersecurity firm, your work would include defending against potential network attacks. Can you give us some more details about what specifically your firm does?
So at Silo City IT, we really have two primary focus areas of our business. One being penetration testing services, and that involves identifying where organizations are vulnerable to network attacks and web application attacks and phishing attacks, and providing remediation insight into how to prevent those attacks from happening from what we call bad actors or the hackers who are going to try and get in. And then the other aspect is really managed cyber protection services, and that involves things like endpoint protection to protect laptops and desktops from attacks with malware and um, viruses, and then adding on patch management, where we're patching all the vulnerabilities that Microsoft and Adobe and all the big vendors uh, come out with every month to make sure that those aren't areas that you can be attacked. And we do a variety of other things: firewall as a service, secure remote access, and multi-factor authentication have really been a large part of what we've been doing since COVID hit, to enable those organizations that didn't previously have the ability to securely access their internal networks, enabling them to have a telework workforce.
And
Those are
if our listeners are not sure what some of those are, the definitions can be looked up on, just a simple Google search, right?
right. And I'm always happy to, if any listeners want to reach out, I'd be happy uh, to explain anything to them or send them links on where they could get some of those explanations. But yeah, each of those terms, uh, you will find a plethora of information when you Google them.
Very cool. So now that you talked a bit about what your responsibilities are, could you tell me a bit about what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Typical day would probably be easier than a week. Um, every day is different. Some days I wake up at 6 and I have constant meetings throughout the entire day, whether they're Zoom meetings or lately been having some more in-person meetings like we used to. But if I'm not in either phone calls or meetings, I'm usually working actively on client projects, whether that's running penetration tests remotely or uh, working with our vendors to identify feature requests that we have from our customers. Um,
So do you,
So I would say every day is very, very dynamic in my schedule,
yeah.
and I really don't know what's going to be on there until I wake up that morning.
Now, as a CEO of a company, and I know it can be very time consuming, are you still able to set aside time for personal development or conferences? And if so, what kind of activities do you do?
From a conference perspective, I do try to take some time out and focus on specific areas of interest, whether that's industry specific things like medical or financial or legal, and trying to attend some events focused on those or conferences focused on those, really for target industries for the business. But others, especially in the cybersecurity side, Black Hat and DEF CON, which are typically held in Vegas. This year they were held virtually, and um, so the last 5 days or so, I've been just live streaming on multiple computers, catching different briefings here and there. And again, that's a big thing from a networking perspective. There's some chat rooms that are associated with a lot of that, where it's just a bunch of hackers that are talking, um, and most of the time, due to the rules that they have in place on those forums, there's no badgering, there's no negative talk allowed, and they're just sharing information, and everyone's teaching each other, and it's a great place to learn. And the fact that DEF CON this year was free
Oh, nice.
um, really helped out because you don't have to fly to Vegas, and it's usually like $2,000 to attend. So
Yeah.
for a high school or college student, that would be kind of difficult to do.
Yeah, it's a steep price there
Yeah,
for them.
right, right,
Well, for anyone.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But overall, I would say I'm trying to get better at the finding some more time for myself, and trying to stay sane in that manner. I have two young kids and my wife, and so trying to spend time with them um, really is where my priorities are whenever I can get away from work.
Yeah, it's a big balancing act, right?
Right, right.
So, after telling us about your role in the company, can you tell us what the favorite part of your work is?
Personally, I really enjoy uh, working with a variety of different customers, regardless of industry. But every engagement is different, and having having a personal interaction with clients and identifying a problem and coming up with a solution is always something that I've been passionate about, regardless of what it is. And um, so, really, just having that personal connection, um, working with someone and working with so many different unique people and solving their issues. Uh, that's really something that I thoroughly enjoy. And I will say that from a high school and college perspective, soft skills are a huge portion of business today, and there's so many people that are on the technical side that fall into being so technical and focusing on those hard skills that they don't really um, work on their soft skills and their business acumen. And um, that's if you're a mad scientist and don't need to talk to anybody and know everything, and you can you know work for the government and stay in a basement and code, more power to you. But if you want to be in an entrepreneurial role someday, or you want to be in kind of the mixed area of like a sales engineer, where you're technical and working in sales, you need to have those soft skills to be able to communicate. And that's a big portion of, I feel, what differentiates us from a lot of the other firms that are doing cybersecurity is they don't have engineers that can really speak to customers unless they're super super technical.
Yeah, right. Totally understand. You have to communicate, and get the ideas across, right?
Right, right.
Now, how about telling our listeners about something that was a challenge for you at work and how did you overcome it?
When I was working as a government contractor prior to having my company, I had a previous company and I was deployed overseas working on um installing and uh, architecting communications for the military. And we ran into a variety of issues trying to set up what you would think of as like a typical office use of someone accessing whatever type of programs, whether it's Microsoft Word or it's websites or whatever it might be, but trying to allow users in a very remote area of the world to communicate over a satellite to try and access things like that proved to be quite difficult. And so there was a lot of collaboration between different vendors that we were working with and a lot of different team members on each portion of the communication that we really had to work together and have dropped everyone dropped everything to make sure that we could prioritize this and get it up and operational so people could do what they needed to do. And that was uh, uh, probably the first time that I really understood like the full teamwork involved in like a engineering type role. It's uh, not something that you're not a sports team or anything like that. It's troubleshooting an issue and having to work together and just everybody drop everything to work for the mission. And it was very satisfying once it was all done and we were able to get everything up and operational and have these people be able to do what they needed to do.
That's amazing. Yeah, it takes a team, right?
Right, right.
So, switching gears a little bit, as a teacher, I often have students ask what skills or education they need to join a certain career path. Can you tell me what you think are the most important hard skills and most important soft skills? Because I know we've talked about that, are when you work in your field.
Sure, sure. So the hard skills, they're especially in cybersecurity, they're evolving every day. Um, attackers are coming up with new methods, and we've seen a lot of that in present times with COVID. That attackers have created new malware specifically for COVID, new ransomware that's targeting COVID. Um, a lot of phishing campaigns, and so being able to keep up with threats that we're seeing today and analyzing those and figuring out how to stop that is a very difficult skill, and there's so much involved in that that I think it really depends on the skill sets of the individual and really what they enjoy doing, because you can go on the side of uh, malware analysis and malware research where there's brilliant people around the world that work on this all day, every day, where they dissect ransomware and try to figure out how to decrypt it and how to block it. And those are the people that we need uh, so that we can protect ourselves from 10,000 new pieces of malware that are created a day. Um, Aside from that, there's some really great companies and really great capabilities leveraging artificial intelligence with cybersecurity now, and also threat intelligence is a very big portion that you don't see all that often unless you're in very large companies or large vendors that specifically focus on it. And it's a skill set all in itself, because being able to have people who understand how to go into the dark web and find things. We have an engagement coming up that we're starting later today that we're going to be running a dark web investigation for a particular organization that was having someone who was being harassed. And we're trying to see if we can identify on the dark web if anyone was talking about that particular person or their organization. And there's a lot that's involved in that. Um, but it's a skill set in its own, and it's a fun thing to do if you know what you're doing. Um, and probably the last one I would bring up would be threat hunting. That's not currently, as far as I know, in any schools really.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard too much about it.
That's really involving um, not looking at like antivirus and endpoint protection, but having the ability to dig through and forensically investigate multiple systems or even an entire organization to identify if there are any current threats that have been undetected. So, in research, if any of your listeners are looking up any of these keywords, they'll probably run into a keyword called APT or Advanced Persistent Threat. And a lot of threat hunting involves trying to find if something has been essentially sitting on your network for a long time and just hasn't been activated yet. And that's what typically happens when you see in the news all of these data breaches. And there were tens of millions of credentials involved in data breaches just last week. And so a lot of times an attacker will come in, they'll drop something in, whatever method they took, and then just leave it sit there until they're ready to execute on it. And unless you're performing active threat hunting, you're never going to find it until it's usually too late. So that skill set in itself is very valuable right now, and there's not a whole lot of engineers that can do it. So those would be three big hard skills that I would say are uh, in need right now. But we need more cybersecurity people, regardless, around the world. So
Yeah,
any topic, any interest, the attackers are always ahead, and we're always trying to catch up and stop what we can. So the more people we can get in our arsenal, the better.
yeah, it's pretty scary stuff,
Uh,
right?
yeah,
We
yeah.
need more
And
people
then
to stop it.
soft skill wise, really presentation skills I've found to be very essential. And uh, I've seen it more and more in universities. They're starting to teach, entrepreneurship, and a lot of that involves being able to adequately present uh, topics, whether they're random topics that are thrown at you or whatever it may be. But being able to present, and it doesn't matter what it is. Um, a lot of what I do is outside of the technical side. It's being able to present the results of something to an organization after we've worked on a project. And if you can't explain the results, if you can't present them to everyone across the board, from the CEO down to the technical team in their IT group, then your message isn't going to get across, and most likely your services or your job is going to be looked at as unsatisfactory because of the fact that you weren't able to communicate what you were doing properly.
Cool. So are there any applications such as Power BI or Excel that you often use in your work? And
I would say,
I mean, that you can talk about?
in general, I mean, having a good understanding of all of Microsoft Office or Google G Suite, either um, are used across the board right now, and I'm not saying being able to write every kind of formula and macro and everything in Excel, anything like that, but just having an understanding of how to do basic things in there, and PowerPoint, same thing. Just being able to have an understanding of how to actually use it and create a presentation. And whether it's G Suite or Microsoft, um, those are definitely things that we use on a regular basis. Anytime you're presenting, you're typically using PowerPoint, and anytime we're writing proposals, they're Word documents. Um, but outside of those, there's so many tools that we use from the services side. That's penetration testing tools. There's hundreds of those. Um, from a business side, uh, CRMs or customer relationship management capabilities, and being able to track your communications with your customers and track lead generation efforts and marketing efforts. There's a lot on the business side of things. And then you get into the accounting side with QuickBooks or Xero or whatever you're using. So there's a lot of aspects. It depends on what you're looking at, but I would say for someone who is interested in getting into cybersecurity, the first tool set that I would recommend they look into would be Wireshark.
Okay.
It's free. There's a lot of tutorials, a lot of free training, and really will allow them to get a good understanding of communication between systems and the network side. And if you can get really good at Wireshark, then you can be a good cyber defense engineer. We can train you after that, but if you can understand how systems are actually communicating, that's a big portion of the analysis that we have to do.
Well, I think that's huge for our listeners there to hear that a specific program that they could maybe take a look at. So, like, I know this isn't one of our questions, but about how many programs would you say, or applications that you say that you would use altogether? Just like a rough estimate.
For for our services, or for
Yeah.
overall, like our penetration testing and things like that?
Yeah, just overall.
Close to 200.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
On the penetration testing side, there's a few capabilities now that are on that cutting edge side that we're focused on, where we can automate a lot of the penetration testing.
Mm.
And that's a big push for us. We're continually expanding our capabilities in that manner. But another great area for students to learn is going on to GitHub and just running searches through repositories for different topics. You can find so much information on there, and you can find a lot of training capabilities, especially in cyber, that are all free, that people have designed automated lab build outs, and just done a lot of the work for you, where all you have to do is pull down their code and off you go. It's a big resource for us when we're looking at new types of attacks that we should try. And a lot of the malware researchers that I was talking about earlier, a lot of them, when they perform their research, they will put the signatures that would be used to identify that particular strain of malware. We'll put those on GitHub to share those out. So it's a really big community. All those free resources from this past DEF CON, they posted all of those scripts, and everything that everyone wrote on there they're all on GitHub. So there's a wealth of knowledge there, and it's where a lot of our tool sets come from.
Yeah, that's awesome. That there's a place you can go to kind of find some more tools to use.
Mm-hmm. And they're all free, which
Yeah,
is very helpful,
bonus.
especially while learning.
And finally, before we let you go, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know that we didn't cover?
I would say, especially those that are in high school or just starting out in college, um, start looking at different skill sets and just experimenting. If you're interested at all, whether it's cybersecurity or IT in general, um, start getting out to whether they're events like I was talking about, or whether it's just information and forums and things like that online. But start as early as you can, because that's when you're going to be able to build up, your background and be able to come out of school um, more valuable. And um, the more that you can learn, the better. And a lot of what we do is just learning on a daily basis. Like I said, everything changes regularly. Um, so just establishing yourself as far as learning as much as possible and always wanting to learn. If that's not something that you like doing and you don't like experimenting, and then this field may not be for you, because regardless, you're always going to have to learn something new.
Yeah.
So my biggest advice would just be reach out to anybody and everybody you can and just start experimenting with things. We've been working with some universities on coming up with workshops, and uh, I'm hoping probably next year we'll be able to at least start posting some information on our site for training for just different open source resources like I was talking about, and some of the different things that we use that anyone would be able to set up at home just on their laptop. Yeah.
And just for our listeners, what is your website address again?
It's silocityit.com.
Thanks. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jeff. And to all of our listeners, check out our previous podcasts where we have spoken to professionals working in evaluation and manufacturing. For more information about starting your career as a data scientist, go to dataanalytics.buffalostate.edu. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get notifications each time we release a new episode, and join us October 1st for the next episode of Buffalo State Data Talk.